I want to help you increase your success with your visual field presentation. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to demonstrate what I think is an optimal visual field presentation, and then we'll go through each step and each element of that presentation and talk about why doing it that way is optimal and why it works really, really well. This is the visual field screening, and this is a screening that Dr. Jones would like you to have done today. What this does is it helps to check for lots of different eye diseases and disorders, things that can be difficult to check otherwise, like glaucoma or diabetic retinopathy, retinal detachment, and really just a whole lot more than that. And what's important is that this machine actually can catch those things in the really early stages. And that matters because if we can catch those things really, really early, then that actually makes them much more treatable. So that's very important. Now it's $15, and for someone like you, because you are nearsighted, actually significantly nearsighted, you are actually at higher risk for retinal detachment in particular. So that's why Dr. Jones thinks it's especially important for someone like you, okay? So go ahead and make your selection here at the bottom, and then sign and date. Okay, so let's talk about each element of that visual field presentation and what makes that element successful. So let's start with the beginning. We said this is the visual field screening, and it seems kind of obvious, but when you say that, gesture to the machine. I know I've seen lots of optometric technicians that actually gesture to this and say, this is the visual field screening, but this isn't the visual field screening. This right here, this machine, is what does the visual field screening. So eliminate confusion by gesturing to the right area. Then we moved on and said, Dr. Jones would like you to have this done today. Now, I said Dr. Jones, but really what you should do is use the name of your doctor. Dr. Jones, Dr. Smith, Dr. whatever your doctor's name is. And we want to do that because your doctor's name carries weight. It's not just you making this recommendation because you feel like it, your doctor is making the recommendation. The next part is to say this machine will check for lots of different eye diseases and disorders. Now, that's important because we're going to start general by saying that, and then we're going to list some specific ones, such as diabetic retinopathy, retinal detachment, glaucoma, and then we'll end with, and lots more, because you want them to know that this checks for more than we could possibly list off. So from there, we will go on and say, and this machine can catch those things in the very early stages. This is actually a really important detail that you don't want to just gloss over. So make it its own separate point. From there, you then can say, and because it catches them in the early stages, that makes them a lot more treatable. Again, make this a separate point. The temptation will be to just run all of that together, catches these diseases in the early stages, makes them more treatable. But when you do that, you lose the emphasis and it loses the impact on the customer. So resist the temptation to run it all together. From there, we move on and say, it's $15, and here's what we'll say. Talking about the price can make some of us nervous, but just mention it smoothly and move on from there. Don't dwell on the price, and don't say it's only $15 because we don't want to sound like a used car salesman, and the price is not the actual selling point. So just say it's $15 and move on. So we'll say it's $15 and for someone like you, now I'm getting specific and I'm talking about you in particular. When you start talking about the patient specifically, you regain their interest, okay? So now we're going to get specific. It's $15 and for someone like you, because you have a family history of diabetes, you're at higher risk for diabetic retinopathy. Or because you have a family history of high blood pressure, you're at higher risk for hypertensive retinopathy. Or, even more general, because you are nearsighted, you should know the more nearsighted you are, the more at risk you are for retinal detachment in particular. And then we're moving on and saying, so that's why Dr. Jones, we're using his name again, so that's why Dr. Jones would really like you to have this done. Now, once you've used the doctor's name again, now we're going to actually ask for their selection. So we say, that's why Dr. Jones would like you to have this done today. Okay? That one word, that's really all you need. You don't want to say, do you want to have this done, yes or no, because you don't want the last thing that they hear and then the word that's stuck in their head to be no. Just simply say, okay. And then, this is the real key, and this is hard, wait for a response. Our temptation is going to want to be to keep talking until they finally throw their hands in the air and say, okay, fine, I'll take it. But just say, okay, and then wait. And the response is either going to be, sure, that sounds great, in which case, yay. Or they'll say, no, I don't want to do it, I don't want to. In which case, it's their choice, so that's fine. Or, and this happens a lot, they'll actually ask you questions. Wait, how much did you say it was? Or what does it check for? Or does it hurt? How long is it going to take? Whatever their questions are, you can answer their questions and then have them make their selection. The next part is to actually ask them to make their selection. So we'll use the visual field screening pad and ask them, make your selection here at the bottom, and then sign and date. Now it's important, I didn't say go ahead and check yes or no, right? Because if I do, what's the last word that they heard? No. That's not what I want stuck in their head. So make your selection at the bottom, and then sign and date. It's really important when you're going through this that you give each element of the presentation its own weight and its own time. It's also really important that you establish eye contact when you're making the presentation, because people will trust you if you can look them in the eye, and then reestablish eye contact at every major point of the presentation. You don't want to stare at them like you're weird, but you also don't want to neglect them and be staring at the table while you're talking to them either. So reestablish eye contact at major points. You're less likely to sound robotic after you've said this for the 1,000th time if you can be looking somebody in the eye. So that's really, really important. So now that we've gone through each element of the presentation, let's watch it again. This is the visual field screening, and this is a screening that Dr. Jones would like you to have done today. What this does is it helps to check for lots of different eye diseases and disorders, things that can be difficult to check otherwise, like glaucoma or diabetic retinopathy, retinal detachment, and really just a whole lot more than that. And what's important is that this machine actually can catch those things in the really early stages. And that matters because if we can catch those things really, really early, then that actually makes them much more treatable. So that's very important. Now it's $15, and for someone like you, because you are nearsighted, actually significantly nearsighted, you are actually at higher risk for retinal detachment in particular. So that's why Dr. Jones thinks it's especially important for someone like you, okay? So go ahead and make your selection here at the bottom, and then sign and date.